group. We're going to be filming a little bit of it today. First thing I wanted to do was to talk about something called the law of unintended consequences. Any of you ever are familiar with that? How many of you have ever made a mistake? Yeah. Anybody? And are you counting them? How many of you, once you made that mistake, said, I'm never going to make that mistake again? I know I did. And how many of you made the same mistake again? What that falls right into is the law of unintended consequences, simply because we intend good things. We intend to do things in our life. We intend to make things work. We intend to make things happen. We intend to make a lot of money. We tend to be happy. We tend to have relationships work, be healthy, lose weight, whatever it is we're trying to do. And what happens is that doesn't happen. In other words, we get caught up in the idea that we're trying to make things happen, and suddenly things don't happen. And so that's the law of unintended consequences, as well as law of unintended consequences means that you affect one thing. For example, I don't know if anybody remembers here, People Airlines. I think it was
People Express. Sure.
People Express, yeah.
Cattle Car Airlines.
Yeah, Cattle Car. They dipped the prices really, really low, and people were going to sign up, no frills, everything signed up and go on flights. And what happened is they grew and grew and grew and grew, and suddenly they couldn't even, they couldn't even be on time. They couldn't. Their capacity, they hit their capacity and they exceeded it, and consequently they couldn't stay in business because people just dropped out like flies right and left. They had complaints right and left. They just couldn't keep up with it. So the law of unintended consequences in that case was that they tried something, they wanted to increase sales, which they did, but they were unable to handle the capacity once the sales got to the point to where they were successful, that type of thing. And so there's a lot of things that happen in our lives that we prefer to happen better, but they just don't. What I want to talk about today is how many of you are interested in being a life coach or are a life coach or doing life coaching, something like that. Anybody? We're talking about making mistakes, unintended consequences, things that we intend to do but they don't get done because we run into something I call self-sabotage, which is really just life. Life just sort of has a way of happening, and sometimes it happens regardless of our intentions. And so what happens when you're a coach? First of all, I came up with the idea of, I'm a chiropractor by trade, but I came up with the idea of teaching life coaches because I found out that essentially life coaches are about transformation and about helping other people push through obstacles in their life and stuff. And that's really what I was all about. I found that as a chiropractor I was limited, not limited, but I felt limited in just dealing with the body, the nervous system, subluxations, things like that. I started working with the mind, the emotions, and I found a lot of breakthroughs were taking place there. In fact, I found most of what was happening with people's health was happening between their ears. And when I discovered that, I began to work that way, working with that part of the nervous system, the brain, and using feedback mechanisms like applied kinesiology, which is muscle testing and getting stuff done that way. Long story short, fast forward, I discovered that there was a subconscious being. We like to think of it as a subconscious mind, but it's actually a subconscious being because it actually has its own intelligence. And this being had its own way of doing things. When I first started out, in fact, today, by the way, is an anniversary. 20 years ago, anybody remember what happened in Atlanta? We had a humongous snowstorm, and I remember it was thundering and lightning and it was snowing. This was March 13th, 1993. And I remember that day because that's the day I traveled across town worried about her, thinking that she wasn't answering her phone because I was worried about her safety and health and all that. So I traveled through the snow and the thunder and the lightning to get to her, and I haven't left since. We've been together ever since that day. So this is our 20th anniversary of being together forever and ever, my one and only. So
she snowed you.
Yeah, it was a snow job. I
steam cleaned the house.
Yeah, she steamed because I called her because she wasn't answering them. And back up a little bit, I had a girlfriend kill herself, so I was like, no, so I was like freaking out. And so when she wasn't answering the phone, I was driving this little Honda through the snow and the sleet and the ice and it was thundering and lightning. I remember that. I said, this is the freakiest storm I've ever seen in my life. But I made it through, and I got through, and she was okay. She was steam cleaning. And so, and then I was so happy I stayed with her ever since. So that's the story of us. So, so anyway, that's for the record. What I discovered since that day is I discovered this being that was inside. I was doing muscle testing and trying to figure out what was this, why was my life not working the way it should? Why was I not making money? Why was I not being successful? Why couldn't I do the things I wanted to do? Why were all these tragedies and disasters happening in my life? And I tried to figure this out, and I couldn't figure it out. But I figured there was a being inside of me that was making things happen. And in fact, what I did was I called this being the one who makes things happen. For lack of a better term, that's what I called it. And so with that said, I just started testing and speaking to this being as if it were an intelligent being. And lo and behold, I started getting answers. And I kept going along this way, and I began to find out that there was a, come on in, there was a limit to what I could find out from this being. First of all, there seemed to be a wall. Anybody ever try to do something and you just sort of hit the wall and you just can't get beyond that wall, like you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to make money work or relationships work, something work, and it just doesn't happen. Anybody have that experience? Ever? Just me? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And I discovered that when I hit that wall, I had no access to what lay behind it. And in logical soul work, what I discovered was that there's a field of decisions. Everything happens because a decision is made. Nothing happens when a decision is not made. A decision relates to computers. For example, a computer has switches. In other words, the circuits or whatever, on, off, on, off, on, off. Everything you see on a computer screen is glitches, ons and offs. Depends on the degree of, I'm not technical, so I couldn't tell you how it works. But all I know is that in electrical construction, when I used to study that, all circuits are comprised of on and off. And if something is open, then electricity can go through. There's a, and you can actually set up logic, and that's how computers were set up, logic based on whether or not this circuit flows or whether it doesn't flow. And so it's either a yes or a no. Like that, we have synapses in the nervous system, the brain, and we're only using a very, very small fraction of our capacity, simply because there's so much going on all the time. If we were to be aware of everything happening right now, we'd be totally overwhelmed because there's so much stimulus coming into us. We have a reticular activating system that filters out and makes sure that we're stable. In other words, make sure we only get the information that we need. So consequently, we can only hold maybe 2 or 3 items in our mind at one time before we start getting a little freaky. So like that, I started testing this subconscious being, and I discovered that it was an intelligence just like any other intelligent being, except it was more so. I found it was very intuitive, very powerful. And I remember we were living together, and I was walking down the hallway, and this book fell off the shelf in my path. Anybody ever had that happen? And then I opened the book, and I saw exactly what I needed to see. There was this book that somebody had given me 10 years before that. His name was Ed Steele. He gave me a book called The Secret Behind the Miracles by Max Freedom Long. And I just happened to open to that page that started talking about this being that I was testing. I'd never opened the book before. This is the first time it happened. And I still have the book. And it just opened to that section where it started talking about this Unahitali, or this inner being that the Hunas, or the Kahunas, talked about in Hawaii. And they said there were 3 separate beings, and I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. And I started looking at that, started testing it. I didn't just take it on face value. I started testing what it was saying. And that's how I came up with the logical soul. That plus the idea that I discovered there was a way of getting access beyond what I call the wall. In other words, there's this block that stood in the way between me and what I wanted. And that block, you either had access or you didn't. And most of the time that wall or that block stood in the way. And the way I got access was simply asking the wall. A lot of times if we hit the wall, what are we trying to do? How many of you use affirmations, or you go through hypnosis, or maybe you're using NLP or some form of tapping or something? What we're trying to do is affect that wall. What we're trying to do is affect our so-called homeostasis. In other words, we exist in a stable condition, and this stable condition means I don't like new things too much. Just sort of, the status quo is fine. Let's just keep going the way we're going and looking at the same things we're looking at. And we're always on the lookout for more happiness, however. But as far as stability, we're always trying to hold ourselves together, pull it together. Remember that expression? So consequently, when new things happen, we tend to sort of shut those out. Now, this homeostasis is in our subconscious. In other words, our subconscious says, this is our parameter. These are our parameters. This is our fence. We're going to stay inside this fence. If we go outside of that, it's dangerous. And we set these parameters up based on the idea that we're going to survive and stay safe if we stay within these parameters. That's what I call the law of very good reason. Subconscious has a very good reason for setting these parameters, pulling up this wall and saying, you can't go beyond this. And we listen to it because we don't know any better. We don't know how to get beyond or get access beyond that wall. And so consequently, we've defined the parameters before we were 6 years old, for the most part, and we stay there. And that's how we live our lives. With Logical Soul, I found that doesn't have to stay the same. I found that there's a way of getting beyond that wall, getting access to those hidden, deep-rooted decisions that run our lives right now, and we don't have access to them, but now we do. Now we can get access to that. The one who made the decision can change the decision. We just need to touch base with the one who made that decision, whether it's our inner child, or whether it's our ancestors, or whether it's a family member, or whoever it is. And this is a way of doing that. I know April's she's doing the course right now. How many of you've had sessions before? Mm-hmm. Any experiences you want to share, or anything that you want to talk about?
I think the most important core component to me that I found out was that it wasn't so much any exterior thing, it was limits I set on myself on almost everything.
Uh-huh. Right.
And getting past those is the trick, because they're part of you.
Right.
So whether it's a good limit where you say I can do this, and there's areas in my life I'm extremely confident in,
right.
And there's areas in my life that just seem to be this whirlwind of repetitive roadblocks,
mm-hmm.
and the realization that it's all inside me, and I'm the one that has to release them or
right.
cause them to be released, or going through the process.
Right. Okay, so you're finding your own limitations or self-imposed limitations are what hold you back.
Oh yeah.
And you've made some progress, I take it.
Oh yeah.
Since that.
Yeah.
And once you discovered these limitations, you basically said,
Yeah, I mean we've been working on our $30,000 raise this month.
Yeehaw!
So I was not unhappy with that, but I can still fill the wall. And I'm thinking, well, if you can get a $30,000 raise, what happens if you could actually remove the wall?
What happened if the law started working for you?
We've done the thing where, can you accept $1 million? And you go through it, but you don't really accept it on the first try, maybe.
Right.
At least I don't. But I'm now aware that the wall that used to be here is now here. And as long as it can be here, why can't it be there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If I ask a question?
Sure.
What did you notice that you're able to do to push the wall that allowed you to get that raise?
He reset my limits, and it wasn't like there's a magic pill,
mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden I went from earning $40,000 a year to $400,000. But there was a resistance before that's now been moved out, and I'm confident that if I keep doing this, it'll keep moving out and out and out.
In general, or was there something specific?
You were talking monetarily, or there's
just
so many aspects of your life that you want to improve.
What you, I guess, where the wall was.
I used to have
how did you know that it was moved?
I used to have a multi-million-dollar computer company when I was in Colorado, and eventually, piece by piece, it got taken away from me. Mm-hmm. And as every piece was taken away, mm-hmm. I brought my limits back, mm-hmm. and back, mm-hmm. and back, and reset them lower and lower and lower. And at the end of this, I finally decided, I really had enough of this, and started questioning. I used to go to a church that practiced the law of attraction, and all. It's just, you have to accept it about yourself, that the limit is self-imposed, and that you can fix this. You can reset that back outwards. Because, most of us have no problem being able to earn as much money as we want to earn. But what stops us is ourselves. There's a belief inside ourselves that, oh gosh, there's been 10 things in a row wrong, there's going to be 11, there's going to be 12, there's going to be 13. Mm-hmm. Well, those are self-imposed beliefs. Mm-hmm. And we certainly live in trying times where there can be evidence for either case. Yeah. My ex-wife used to have this incredible ability. She would walk into a restaurant and get bad service. There could be 15 of us at the table, but she expected to get bad service. And every other time it was, you look at it and go like, how did you do that? That's incredible.
Special talent.
Well, it's that's a negative one that hurts her. I frankly expect to walk into a restaurant and pay for food and get good food, and I very, very seldom don't. But that's a silly little limit. It's like, if you watch The Secret, get in the parking spot. Get the parking spot every time. So I
do when I'm with Robin. I get a parking spot every time.
Oh, yeah, that's her.
And if I rush to find one, then there's usually one that opens up in front.
Yeah.
A closer spot when she's with me, and maybe I didn't take it because we were rushing or so. But
so what the problem is we can accept something simple like a parking spot, but accepting the things that we really want, whether it's monetary, whether it's love, whether it's success, whatever it is, we've all set this limit, and what he's talking about is the limit that's got to be moved. It's not that you don't have the capability of doing it.
Right.
I mean, look at Forrest Gump. I mean, there's plenty of people out there walking around like that. But it's your limit, and if you don't if you can move the limit bar out and out, then you've got that extra pool to swim in.
Would you call a limit? Would another term for it be a comfort zone?
Maybe a comfort zone, maybe a danger zone. Maybe I'm comfortable in here, because I certainly wasn't comfortable where I was, but I had to readdress, and it's working with people like Michael that I know this is right, and sometimes you have to hit it with a hammer a whole bunch of times just to move it an inch, and sometimes you can make a big leap.
Yeah, and that's a very good point that you brought up, David. Also, the idea that you were asking him specifically what was happening. The interesting thing about this work is that we're all different, and we all have different, turning points, as you will. Different turning points, different needs, different decisions, because all of us have different decisions. Now, there are certain decisions, for example, that are what I call archetypal. And archetypal decisions would be, who am I representing when I'm doing this? For example, am I the hero? Am I the mother? Am I the, whatever? These are archetypes. These are ways that we see ourselves when we take action. So in taking action, we can come across as being the hero or the mother or whatever until we get slammed in the face, and then we're no longer the hero. And then life sort of flies in the face of our archetype, and then we're confused. And then we get to be the victim, or then we get to be something else, another archetype. So victim tyrant is a good example of this. You're yelling and screaming at those who have no power over you, and you're cowering in fear and feeling abused by everybody else. These are different archetypes that complement one another and go together. And we all tend to fall into one category or another, and we cover these during the course, but primarily it's all about decisions. It all boils down to decisions. What are the decisions that we have made that have set our parameters or set our wall or set our limits? And do we even want to move those? I don't assume, for example, if I do a session with you, that you want to move your limits. You may be perfectly comfortable where you are, in which case I say, great, that's wonderful. How can I help you today? It's not about me. In other words, it's not about where I think you should be. It's about who you are and where you would like to be or where you want to be and what's standing in the way of where that is. So, good points, both of you.
Yeah, I spend most of my life in some sort of internal conflict, and I'm not pretending that I recommend that for people because it's not a zone of happiness. Mm-hmm. I'm always striving, and I look at people around me that are just so happy with their lives.
Yeah.
And they're just thrilled with what they're doing, and it's just, for me, I'm always in this state of want.
Well, you're in a state of happy motion. You're happily rolling along, and I know what you mean. It's like you create a situation of discomfort so that you keep rolling. In other words, motion is where your happiness lies. When you're in motion, in other words, you probably feel unhappy when you're blocked, when you're not moving. Mm-hmm. And so motion for you is a form of happiness.
Right.
Even though you might not call it happiness, it is, and that's circumstantial. So let's move right along here. I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of points about life coaching, logical soul life coaching in particular, and then we're going to do, probably the second half, we're going to do a session where you get to see what we're doing, what all the fuss is about, and the rest of you have already seen sessions. You get to participate or volunteer or whatever you want. Anybody knows what a life coach does? Have any idea? What's the life? I mean, why life coaching? I mean, what is this thing called life coaching? It says life coach. Okay. What would be that thing that would define this for you? Anybody?
Somebody that you're accountable to for the goals that you set, and somebody that keeps you on track.
Okay, so goals accountability. Okay, good. Goals, accountability, what else? That's pretty much it, right? I mean, that's how we traditionally think of life coaching. Well, I'm going to help you get unstuck so that you can reach your goals, so that I can keep you accountable so we can get there. Now, there's all sorts of methodology with life coaching. One particular, or actually the main differentiation is directive versus non-directive. And I'm just going to briefly mention this. Directive coaching is, I'm more of a mentor. In other words, I know how to operate this particular piece of software.
Oh, good. Mentor me in getting this thing up.
What's that?
Could you mentor me in how to make this thing up?